How on earth do you top something like It Takes Two, a game that came out of absolutely nowhere but went on to sell 20 million units and be awarded Game of the Year at the 2021 Game Awards? Well, I mean, saying it came out of nowhere sort of isn't fair. It came from Hazelight, who had earlier put out the co-op-inspired Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons, as well as the co-op-inspiring A Way Out, which was the closest we're ever going to get to a Shawshank Redemption video game adaptation, and if you haven't played it yet, you absolutely should. It's awesome. Still, It Takes Two was in another stratosphere. It is inarguably one of the best co-op games ever made, and even if it weren't co-op, it would still be staggeringly good as a single-player game, because it was bursting with imagination and creativity and heart and joy, so many of the things that are surprisingly rare to come by in games not made by Nintendo. The sheer surprise of this experience was a huge part of its reception and impact. We just had no idea that this was coming, and it was so good that it completely KO'd us. That sort of surprise doesn't come along very often in the world of video games. It also doesn't hurt that it arrived during the pandemic, when we were all stuck at home feeling very isolated, and what better way to connect us to others and to put a smile on our face than something like It Takes Two. It's almost as though it were made for that very moment in history. So the question still stands, how do you top something like that? Well, I actually don't think that's a helpful question when it comes to split fiction, because this is not as, like, knock you on your ass surprising as It Takes Two was, but it is still possessed of the same imagination and creativity and brilliance and energy and joy that It Takes Two was. It still regularly does that thing where you arrive at a new location and you're like, what the fuck is this? And then you realize where you are and what the new mechanics are and what your goal is, and you just light up with a huge smile because you just know that what you're about to go through is going to be fun as hell. Over and above this, Split Fiction is way more ambitious in every aspect of its design. Visually, this game looks stunning. The environments consistently jaw-dropping. The breadth of the game mechanics seemingly endless. The co-op mechanics so clever, always able to get you and your friend laughing while you fumble your way through everything. The boss design, absolute 10 out of 10 all the way through. There are no bad bosses here, bangers every time. Now look, there are some things about Split Fiction that I didn't love on their own merits, namely the characters and the writing, which are nowhere near as captivating as the gameplay and setting. Thinking more comparatively, Split Fiction's overall pacing isn't perfect the way that It Takes Two's was, since its more ambitious game structure can sometimes feel like you're spending a little too long with some gameplay scenarios. But I want to be really clear that those complaints are minor quibbles when set against just how fantastic this game is. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that the ending sequence of this game, which I won't spoil, I won't show it to you, but it is a goddamn all-timer, and we're going to be talking about it for years to come. Truly incredible. So yeah, Split Fiction doesn't have quite the same surprise factor that It Takes Two did, and it reaches for a little too much sometimes in its desire to evolve the formula, but even with those shortcomings, this is still going to be one of the best games you play this year, I promise you that. First of all, let's clarify some of the questions you might have about Split Fiction as a co-op game, because yes, this is a 100% co-op game. You cannot play it on your own. You cannot play it with the assistance of an AI bot. You need a human person to play with. You can do that locally on your couch, or you can do it remotely. There is no matchmaking, so you'll need to have a person that you know to play with. Luckily, Hazelight has done a bunch of stuff to make that easier. Firstly, you don't need to buy 2 copies of the game in order to play it. If one person owns it, the other person can download a copy of the game without purchasing it, and you can then share that single copy between the two of you. This was an innovation that Hazelight delivered with It Takes Two, and they're doing it again here, but they're taking it even further. For the first time ever, this functionality will become cross-play enabled, meaning that if I bought the game on PlayStation and my buddy is on Xbox, we can still play together. That is pretty crazy, and you've got to tip your hat to both Hazelight and EA for that sort of consumer-friendly technological innovation. Love to see it. If you are like me and you have no friends, then you're in luck, because Hazelight has organized an official Discord that helps you find a friend. And don't forget, you don't need to own a copy of this game in order to play this. So you could literally just bomb into their Discord and be like, hey, anyone looking for a friend? And then you can play through this game on a copy that someone else bought, and, you know, thanks to the random kindness of strangers that you met in Discord, you get to enjoy this. Honestly, that is pretty cool, and it's nice to imagine that a bunch of new friendships get formed because of this game. Finally, Hazelight have one last solution if you simply cannot find a friend anywhere. Joseph Faris will personally deliver one to your door.
Say hello to Split Fiction Friend Edition. Hey.
So TLDR on all of this, yes, it is a co-op game, but please don't let that be a barrier to you enjoying this one, because there's lots of ways to make it happen. And honestly, if you do have someone that you play games with, or even a friend that you don't play games with, this is an incredible experience to have with them, and it's absolutely worth going out of your way to find the 12 hours it takes to play through this.
Welcome to the next chapter of storytelling.
What are you doing in my story? Something bad is going on here.
Let's start with my biggest criticism of Split Fiction, the writing. Writing was not It Takes Two's strong point. That was a tale of a husband and wife thrust into an adventure that would see them re-examine their relationship, a particularly challenging question given they had a child together. That was a really powerful hook in a game like this because as a co-op game, the idea of working together is baked into the core DNA of the experience. The narrative themes and gameplay mechanics of It Takes Two were very unified. It was also a very human and emotive and relatable premise because even if you aren't married, you've seen people who are and you know it can be tough. So the setup was really strong, but the execution was a little uneven. Like, you can imagine how a story like that might unfold and you'd be right, all the beats were there, but some of them didn't hit quite as hard as others and some of them sounded a little sort of tin-eared and some of them came a little later than they should have, so the resolution to the story felt a little hasty. It Takes Two's writing was shooting for the right stuff and it generally landed, but it definitely stumbled a little along the way. I don't think Split Fiction was aiming at the right stuff. This is the story of Mio and Zoe, two unpublished writers who have never met before. They're about to sign their first publishing deal with Raider Corp, and they go in for what they assume will be just a contract signing when things start to get a little weird. They're asked to put on these sci-fi-ass suits and step into this machine without really being told what it's for. Turns out the machine is sort of a metaphor for AI. This machine will harvest the ideas of writers so the publishing company can then take credit for them. It's definitely not subtle, but it's a perfectly salient message in 2025. The machine is built to have one person in each of these pods, but due to an accident, both Mio and Zoe end up in the same pod, and that's the setup that allows them to experience each other's stories. Mio is that very jaded, cynical type who writes sci-fi because it fits her more nihilistic worldview, whereas Zoe is a dreamy idealist who is drawn to the world of fantasy for its ability to frame more idyllic notions of goodness, heroism, and beauty. And that's a setup. Two writers who don't know each other, who don't see the world the same way, and who don't write in the same genre. They're thrust together, forced to experience each other's stories, and in so doing, learn more about the other person.
What's with all the debts and payments in this story?
What do you mean? I'm just curious as to what the story's about. I told you it's a revenge story. That part I got, trust me.
But what's it really about?
Nothing. Oh, come on.
You always put a bit of yourself into what you create.
As a premise, I found it kind of hard to get bored in on this because it creates some very artificial tension between the two of them. Like a husband and wife whose marriage is on the rocks, that is a serious problem. But two authors who like different genres, that's a little harder to get really bored into. Obviously, it's more than just that because we're talking about two different people with two different personalities, but even then, the writing really struggles to make their personalities seem believable and the tension between them seem real. Even as individual characters, they just feel a little bit one-dimensional. They're both nursing a trauma that is revealed bit by bit, and as characters, they kind of struggle to be anything more than that trauma. Most of what they say and do during the game's 12-hour runtime is awkwardly linked back to that mysterious trauma, and you really feel as though some character development outside of that context would have gone a long way. Now, does any of this really matter in a game like Split Fiction? I would argue, no, it does not. No one's picking up Split Fiction looking for Citizen Kane or whatever. They're looking for a fun co-op game, and this is an incredibly fun co-op game, so on that basis alone, Split Fiction is a certified banger. However, the writing and characters are a stark contrast to the brilliance that is the rest of this game. You will always look forward to the next gameplay switch up, the next set of puzzles, the next side story. In contrast, I personally was never looking forward to the next cutscene. I was just hoping it would kind of get over and done with quickly so I could get back to the action. And yeah, it doesn't matter, but it actually could have mattered a lot. Like Pixar, for example, they can take an all-ages premise and infuse it with a maturity and wisdom that resonates with adults. Stuff like Bluey does the same thing. These sorts of movies and TV shows can be quite profound actually, and when something can be meaningful to both children and adults for different reasons, then that thing is usually pretty special. Split Fiction feels like the sort of experience that should fit into that category, but sadly it doesn't. Its greatness lives entirely in its brilliant world, scenario, and gameplay design, and as I said, at the end of the day, that's what really matters the most.
Hey, we need to help each other out!
Split Split Fiction is essentially a sequel to It Takes Two. Not in the continuation of a story sense, obviously, but in the continuation of a game design philosophy that combines relentless gameplay and world design ideation with co-op mechanics. If you haven't played It Takes Two yet, then close this video right now and go and play it. But if you have played it, then you have a good idea what to expect from Split Fiction. You arrive at a new world that is completely different from the last one you were just in like 5 minutes ago. The world is not only aesthetically different, but the very gameplay mechanics you're utilizing are all new. You're going to be using these mechanics to solve puzzles that you couldn't solve alone, and you do that for a little while before a big boss battle, and then it's on to the next world to do it all over again. So that general structure and flow here in Split Fiction is very similar to It Takes Two. There are some notable changes that set this apart, and almost all of them are fantastic, and only one of them is kind of like, not as good. But anyway, we'll come to that. World design first. Holy shit, I don't know what the hell is in the drinking water at Hazelight, but these artists and designers over there have to be on something. You can't make stuff that looks this good without some performance-enhancing substances. Just genuinely, truly, jaw-droppingly stunning art design. You can scarcely believe how good it looks sometimes, because don't forget, most games arrive at an overall visual style in buildings and vegetation and enemy design, etc. And then they remix and reuse those assets for the entire game's runtime. But here in Split Fiction, they have to build these entire visual motifs that get used for like 6 minutes, and then you never see them again. Like this one here, in 1 minute I'm in a sci-fi dystopia running around as a cyber ninja and everything is dark and gritty and cyberpunky, and the very next minute I go through a portal and this is what I see.
I think I'm gonna have a panic attack. Nah, you'll warm up to your super pig powers in no time.
When I played through It Takes Two, I remembered thinking how wasteful it was, in the sense that it would deliver these incredible worlds that were so densely designed that they could have been the setting for an entire game, and then these worlds would just get tossed out after 10 minutes of you stepping into them and you never see them again. Because Hazelight just always had plenty more where that came from. It was like a whiskey tasting session, except instead of giving it a gentle sip, you had to shotgun it before moving on to the next quart. Visually, these worlds are truly next level, but what also separates them from It Takes Two or anything you might have experienced before is just how much more spectacular they are as set pieces. Very early in the game, you get to this part, which is like a 10-minute level that plays out entirely on this sci-fi highway.
So much for very simple and straightforward. Yeah. But damn, what have you?
In another instance, you're in this fantasy world, constantly trying to avoid ogres when you find yourself in a situation like this. Or this one, where the entire boss battle sequence happens on cyber ninja motorcycles after I've just spent the previous 5 minutes riding upside down on the girders surrounding a sci-fi metropolis. So these worlds are really beautiful to look at, absolutely, but what makes them all the more impressive is that they're really exciting theme park rides, each of them, and stepping into them is like stepping into the waiting hall for like Space Mountain or something. It looks really cool and you're impressed by that, but you just know that all that visual flair is there to get you hyped up for a seriously fucking cool ride. Of course, Split Fiction is more than just these big moments. It's also some absolutely excellent co-op puzzle design with some wildly inventive mechanics, all of which continue to evolve as you spend more time in each of the main mission areas. This sci-fi level is a really good example. We'd already been to a few different sci-fi worlds before we got to this one, and when we arrive, we're like, okay, what do you got for us this time? The answer? Dual SMGs. Hell yeah, man. So now we were shooting shit for the first time, felt great, but wait. There's more. We soon unlocked these shield-busting upgrade things that allowed us to each detonate a shield of a different color, and that was then used in a variety of puzzles that forced us to really get our timing right. After that, enemies started getting these shields, so we had to coordinate to bring each of them down. And yes, that robot does look suspiciously like the FF7 robot, but we'll come back to that later. Soon after that, the entire perspective of this area shifted to 2D, and we were now playing a twin-stick shooter.
Target acquired. Launching missiles.
Oh, and just to cap things off, we soon got our hands on jetpacks and jet skis. That is how Split Fiction rolls. It's these rapidly deployed changes to the formula that constantly keep you on your toes, and it's not just different for different sake, it's very clever puzzle design. I think my favorite example of that was this sequence where I was able to move onto a different plane as we moved through the level, meaning I was seeing the same level as my friend but upside down or on its side, and it opened up so many interesting puzzle and platforming challenges, and I can't even imagine how tricky it must have been to design something this good.
The city's being bled dry by the crime syndicate's corruption.
and we're here to assassinate King Straight.
There are 6 of these main scenarios in the game, but peppered throughout them are these side stories. These are brief interludes that whisk you away to entirely new settings with all new mechanics. They're only meant to last for about 5 to 10 minutes, but the variety in them makes them each so surprising. Like this one where we had to avoid the periodic explosions of a collapsing star while we make our way towards the evac point. These side stories are really great, but they also serve to subtly but notably alter the overall flow and pacing of Split Fiction. You do spend a good 2 hours in each of the main scenarios, and I will say that sometimes some of them can drag a little. And then when you get spirited away to one of these new locations in a side story with all new mechanics, you're like, hell yeah, man, let's go. But then the ride comes to a stop and you're back in the same setting that you were in before, maybe wishing that that side story was a little longer because you were having a lot of fun with that one. That feeling of being a little stalled is very short-lived though, since Hazelight will almost always drop something in your lap that's going to change up the formula. But yeah, that feeling does creep in from time to time. Again though, that is just such a minor complaint. So the pacing isn't flawless, who cares? This is still a breathless, joyful, exciting, clever mix of dizzying spectacle and head-scratching puzzles, and anytime you might feel like things are dragging just a little, you can always be confident that Hazelight has something you have never seen waiting around the next bend. To finish up, I want to touch on something that I think is kind of cool. Split Fiction is its own deeply original work. It's the sort of relentless creativity that would be exhausting to take in if it weren't so goddamn fun. At the same time, this is a game that is paying subtle and not so subtle homage to the video games that have inspired the people that made it. There is, for example, an Assassin's Creed Leap of Faith.
You've got to have faith when you leap.
There's a sequence where I play as a monkey getting fired out of what could basically be considered barrels. There's this dude who is basically the Deku Tree, and 10 points if you can tell me what this sequence might be riffing on.
Our mission! Seek and destroy the source of the toxin! Are we clear?
These little Easter eggs and sequences are, to my mind, some meta commentary. This is a game about creativity, the creativity of authors who create worlds and stories. Each new world is inspired by some part of their personality or a moment in their life. When Hazelight add the Halo drop to their game, that's them showing what inspired them as creatives. And it's a really nice, fitting touch for a game like this. And as I mentioned in the intro, there's a sequence at the back end of this game that other games will be paying homage to in the future because it is just that good. But you'll have to experience that for yourself. And you should. You absolutely should. Split Fiction doesn't quite nail its storytelling as much as I would have hoped, and its structure can make pacing feel a little uneven at times, but this is still basically a one-of-a-kind experience, taking everything that made It Takes Two so extraordinary and then dialing it all up to 11. It really does take me back to what Joseph Fares said when he first revealed the game last year.
This time, it's some next level shit, I'm telling you. I mean, no.